So in today's episode, and it's been a couple days since I've been on, mainly due to not only having a cough that won't stop, but also because of work and the holidays. I wanted to talk about something I saw the other day that I think really encapsulates the problem with words and definitions and understanding and history and manipulation and psyoping and American politics, Western politics, and and really the divide and conquer strategy in its fullest. So perfect example. This meme and this meme is not new, but if you look at it, it's like it's no longer Republicans versus Democrats. It's America versus communism, and that's a battle America must win. Growing up, whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican or maybe apolitical, most Americans have heard of communism from the theatrical Hollywood style uh, conjecture, or even the political sphere where a politician will use that word as like a heavy-handed back comment. I mean, Nazi is used also. You'll hear Nazi and communist, even though we supposedly we fought with the communists to defeat the Nazis, even though in the beginning we were financing the Nazis and certainly hoping that they would fight the communists for us. But nonetheless, while the communists make our medication and the communists supply us with our plastic and the communists provide pretty much all the goods and services that our country has become dependent on, we sit there and we still cajole like it's 1948 about communism. And you hear this all the time. Now, especially right leaning people, but I see it in the fake left wing too. There's this, we will defeat communism. And you think these are just slogans and memes and they don't mean anything. Well, that's probably because most of the people seeing this are too young to have experienced and certainly don't learn in school. Why did we fight the Korean War? Why did we fight the war in Vietnam? Why did we have 1 million people killed in Indonesia? Why did we kill 500,000 civilians in Libya? What is the point of these exercises, these horrific moments in history? Why are we surrounding Venezuela right now? Well, it's because of socialism and communism. Those words get used interchangeably in the West. They're not the same. Socialism is a stage on the path to communism. So technically, no one's actually experienced true communism yet, but nonetheless, we'll use them interchangeably in this conversation. But these memes and these slogans end up turning into lives lost, fathers, sons, daughters, mothers, wives, lives ruined. Then economic turmoil, then political strife. And for what? For what? What's the point? Because we fear a system that we claim is so stupid? This is one of the oxymorons or the and double standards that you hear. You'll hear someone tell you something is so stupid and so backwards that only foolish people would ever believe it. But yet they're so afraid of it that they want to kill people over it rather than let people experience it fail and then decide on their own that they don't want to do it. If it's so stupid, why do people keep coming back to it? Well, this lack of understanding and misinterpretation leads to things like this. These You have the people thinking that this group represents the communists or the real socialists, Democratic Socialists of America. Now, I'm not going to go through the full history, but the Democrat Socialist concept was something that emerged in Germany before World War One and during World War One, where people like Rosa Luxemburg were trying to continue the march from Marxism that Engels had pushed in the original DSP to keep them aligned with what the teachings of Marx and the philosophy of Marxism was supposed to be beholden to. But unfortunately, what these people ended up doing was siding with the powers that be in government. So they said, well, we can have change from within the government. We can have change from within the system. So we can have capitalism, but we can make adjustments to capitalism. It's a halfway crook, right? Scared to death, scared to look, you shook. Well, that's exactly what the DSA are. If you think of DSA as halfway crooks. But they do something even worse than halfway crooks, and that is they imitate the full meaning of the term and then distort it. So right off the bat, if you are a Democrat socialist and you are in favor of the capitalist system, not markets, again, don't be conflated. This is another thing. Uh, Capitalism is a system in where the profits of your economy are in command. You're in command of the government, they're in command of the economics, the politics. And the goal in capitalism is maximum extraction of capital per transaction, right? So you want to maximize profits at all costs at all times. That's capitalism. Markets Markets are the things that capitalism takes advantage of. Markets on their own are not capitalism. Capitalism is a philosophy and a way of interacting with markets. Markets on their own are benign. They're just there to represent the will and the needs of people through consumer goods, products, and services. So you have markets in socialist countries. You have markets in countries that are aspiring towards communism. Communist parties engage in markets. Markets are not the enemy. But when you have a democratic socialist, and we'll use the DSA as an example, they are engaging in what they call change through the system that enforces maximum extraction of capital. So what they're doing is they're claiming they're making changes, but all the changes they are allowed to make have to uh, contort themselves towards maximum extraction of capital. So they can't have housing for the sake of living. They have to have housing for the sake of profit. They can't have food that's generated for the sake of eating. They have to have food that can be sold via a market. And if it's not sold for a high enough price, then the government has to contractually buy it. They can make medicine, right? You can have pharmacies full of medication, but people can't afford it. And they'll argue, well, that's because we just need to have more Obamacare in order to afford it. No, Obamacare is a band aid on a gunshot wound. It's not addressing the root cause. The root cause is why is everything so expensive? Why is an MRI in China cheaper than an MRI here? Why is the same medication that's made in China cheaper in China than in the United States if it's owned by an American company? Why are American products in American stores located in China cheaper than they are here? Is it just because they're made there? No, it's because of the system. It's because of the system. And the reason that this continues to occur is because people that call themselves Democrat socialists are stealing the meaning and stealing all the political will and power and then distorting what it means. They're taking on wokeism and calling it socialism. So the average American who is sitting there struggling to pay their bills, struggling with their heating bill, struggling with their food costs, struggling with the cost of school. They see the Democrat socialists and think, well, that's what communism is. That's stupid. Well, the Democrat socialists are stupid. They're not providing anything. You have Mamdani, the mayor of New York, who comes out and says, well, Venezuela's a dictatorship. Cuba's a dictatorship, and they're not LGBTQ enough. LGBTQ has nothing to do with Marxism. LGBTQ has nothing to do with Lenin or Stalin or Rosa Luxemburg or Mao. There's nothing to do with it. They're conflating these things because the representation of socialism is distorted in America. So you think the average blue-collar guy who can't pay his bills, you think they're going to relate to this stuff? And then what do the DSA actually offer? They offer a branch of Democratic Party policy. And the Democrats are one of the two major parties whose job is to steward capitalism for the owners of our society. That's it. They're not there to help you. They're there to help themselves and to help the owners of our society. You never hear Democrats talk about the means of production. They're never going to talk about controlling the means of production because they're not socialists. You never hear the Democrats talk about dialectical materialism. They're not talking about that. In fact, they don't believe in dialectical materialism because they don't believe in free speech. In order to have dialectical materialism, in order to have a thesis, an antithesis, and then a synthesis of ideas, in order to evolve and change and improve, you have to be able to freely discuss ideas. You can't do that in a cancel culture society. And that goes for Republicans and Democrats. You don't hear the Democrats certainly don't believe in strong borders. What socialist country has weak borders? They all have strong borders. What socialist country has weak policing? They all have strong policing. They're all safety first. You think in China you could stab someone on a train and get let out the same day? No chance. No chance. You think you could enter North Korea illegally? The punishment there is death for that. So what are we talking about? Well, then the Democrat socialists will say, well, that's why we're Democrat socialists. We're not real socialists. Okay, so you mean nothing. Because if you call yourself a Democrat socialist, then what is your purpose? You're not anti-imperialist. You're not anti-banking banking system based on usury. You're not in favor of a private central bank or a public central bank. You're in favor of a private central bank controlling all the currency in the West. You're not anti-war. You're not against having a strong border, so you don't believe in sovereignty of any nation. And I know Trotsky believed in the permanent revolution, but most communists, even though they will believe in a camaraderie of the international, they still respect sovereignty in other countries. You don't have that with them. So you're not a socialist. That's like saying, I'm a Philadelphia Philly. I wear a Mets hat. I wear a Mets shirt. I live in New York. I play in New York. And I hate the Phillies. So then how am I a Philadelphia Philly? Just because I call myself that? The Democrat socialists are no more socialists, okay? They're no more socialists than Donald Trump is George Bush. They're both Republicans, but they're not the same. And it doesn't take long to see the difference. And that gets me to something else that I wanted to talk about. And that is this interview or this debate between Haz Al Din and Trevor Loudin, which I thought was amazing. But if we listen to it here, you can actually kind of get a feel for it.
Thanks so much, everybody, for hanging out. We're going to have a fun one today. We're hanging out with Haz Al Din and Trevor Loudin.
You say that it's the communists who have infiltrated the system, but All evidence and experience on my part shows me the opposite is true. It's the system that has infiltrated the communists. Can you name a single Communist Party member who is in office right now?
I can. That is not the point.
No, that is the point.
Welcome to.
So it's rare that you can judge a book by its cover, but you could judge this book by its cover. Trevor Loudin, and he is more of a right-leaning libertarian. His whole point was to argue against communism. He hates communism, but he doesn't understand what a communist is. He conflates the Democrat socialists as communists. So he believes that the communists have overtaken the Democratic Party and have influence in the government and control everything that is wrong with the U.S. government. He thinks that's communist. Now, this happened 2 years ago, so this is closer to the days of the peak of COVID and all that. And Haz Al Din is debating him, and they're arguing with Haz. And I'm not going to go through the whole 2 hours because obviously that's not the point. But they're arguing with him about what it means to be communist. And look, I come from a place where I was once a real Ron Paul libertarian, in the standpoint that I truly believed I'm a live and let live person. I don't want to bother people because I don't want to be bothered. And what I've come to understand, and this is from just studying Marxism without the noise, that communists and libertarians want to get to the same place. They both want to get to that stateless society where they can be free. But the difference is that the communists have a plan for dealing with the government and with other actors now, whereas the libertarians do not. And the blame by Trevor Loudin on all that is wrong with America on communists is so far-fetched because he's sitting there blaming the communists for everything, while a actual communist is telling him, "I'm anti-war, I'm anti, I'm anti-imperialist, I'm anti the usury system, I'm anti all these things," and he's still sitting there blaming the communists. But that's because the communists have no influence in America. The people who call themselves socialists, they're not communists. They're Democrats. So let's skip ahead. And I want to get to a part of this debate where this is where where he really goes off the rail.
But the movement is much.
And we're going to get a stupid little ad here. We're done.
Got the
You're saying he's the
Liberation Road.
puppet master.
Well, he is part of that apparatus.
Who's the puppet master?
Well, I would say Judith LeBlanc would be right up there.
He's arguing that Joe Sims, who's is the co-chair of the Communist Party USA. The Communist Party USA. He's saying that Joe Sims is one of the folks who is the stewards of this apparatus, this communist apparatus that runs the American government, according to Trevor Loudin.
Who is that?
Judith LeBlanc. She's the one who put Deb Haaland in as Secretary of the Interior.
And what is their relation to the Communist Party?
Judith LeBlanc is a member of the Central Committee of the Communist
And
Party.
she herself put someone in a position of power?
Absolutely, she
How?
did. She mounted a campaign called Deb for Interior.
Yeah.
She ran it. They had Facebook pages and buses. She got a whole bunch of celebrity endorsements like Alyssa Milano, Mark Ruffalo, Sarah Silverman.
Right.
They got Deb Haaland nominated as Secretary of the Interior.
So you're
that
claiming
is 100% documentable.
You're saying that she originated that entire campaign.
100%.
So,
she led it.
Can you
She
name
led
a
it.
single Communist Party member who is in office right now?
I can. That is not the point.
No, that is the point.
That
because
is
one of
not-
the things we've been pushing for is them to field candidates instead of kissing Democrat
you're
ass.
trying
and they
to
can't
you're
do
trying
that.
to dissimulate here.
No,
Look,
they don't
it is-
even. They don't have
this
any
is-
independence. They're
Well, no, no,
subservient
no,
to the
hold on,
Democrats.
Let me finish my point.
They're subservient to the
Let me finish
Democrats.
my point.
What he's saying is quite literally, if you don't declare you're a member of something, you have nothing to do with it at all.
That's right. There's
Well, we need
there's a
proof.
communist movement. There's a few people in the Communist Party that direct a movement. The communist movement is why we have open borders. It's why we have Obamacare. It is why Iran is about to get the nuclear
Right.
weapon. The communist movement.
Okay, so right off the bat, right there, you can see why he doesn't understand what a communist is. What communist countries have open borders? I already said this. What communist countries have open borders? China doesn't have an open border. Vietnam doesn't have an open border. Venezuela doesn't have an open border. North Korea doesn't have an open border. Russia didn't have an open border. Belarus doesn't have an open border. What countries in the Soviet bloc had open borders? I don't remember hearing, oh yeah, they had all these great walls and security checks because they had open borders for everybody. It's the liberal apparatus that believes in open border. Now, part of that is because they're influenced by Trotskyite communism, but part of that is also because in the progressive movement, a dilution of the population through forced migration only serves the masters of the population. For example, if you think that open border is a communist policy, what is socialism? Socialism leading to communism. Socialism is the rule of government where the proletariat, meaning the working class, is in control. Okay? The working class is in control of the government, not profits. Okay? Not the capitalist rulers, not the banks, not the large corporations. So, if you have open borders, what happens? You have tremendous amount of competition for labor. Competition for labor drives the cost or drives the salaries and the income down for labor. You think the union busting folks there, you think the union busters are the communists? You think the people that want to bring in a slave labor class to compete with the American population, you think that that's a communist move? The communists don't want that. The communists want strong laborers. The only reason that you have the labor unions of today is because the communists fought with them. The communists were a huge influence in labor unions. That is absolutely the opposite of open borders. If you have open borders, then you have competition of labor, and the ruling class uses that to suppress wages. So that's not a communist concept. So that's completely stupid. Then he says, well, it's because of communists that Iran is going to have a nuclear weapon. If it was up to the communists, you would have a wide open trade relationship and not bureaucratic, but you would have a open and peaceful exchange between Iran and the United States. It's part of the reason that we have an anti-Iranian movement is because the British told the Americans, their owners, they said, "Hey, you guys got to go in there and deal with Iran because the Iranian government is communist leaning now," and that got the Americans all in a hissy fit. This is why they went against Mossadegh. They thought, oh, he's leading towards the communists, which wasn't even true. But the relationship with the United States and Iran is not because of communists. It's the opposite. So he's citing things that don't make any logical sense.
Movement controls the labor unions of this country, and the labor unions control the Democratic Party.
As long as
That
we
is
change
why-
the definition of
that-
communist movement.
Yeah, the communist
agree.
movement is anybody who has an allegiance to the communist movement. Some are party members, some are not. Some are Democrats. Like Chris Murphy, the senator from Connecticut. deeply in bed with the Communist Party. While he was criticizing Trump for Russia, he had a Communist Party member as one of his key staff members.
Communist Party USA, for those who don't know, the Communist Party USA has been a funnel for the Democratic Socialists for the past 30, 40, 50 years. It is not a party that has been fighting against the DSA, fighting against the imperialist wars. They have been a soft-on Democrat party for a long time. They're Democrat light. So the idea that he's citing people from there and saying it represents the communist movement, it's absurd.
And what was their key role as the staff member?
He was running one of his offices.
So I think what you're doing is cherry picking cases where communists are acting as subservient to the Democrats. Because here's the thing I can prove.
Look, Obamacare.
Here's what I have practical experience
was completely a Democratic Socialist of America program.
Look,
it is now the law of the land in this country.
That's not true.
Not true. The fact that Deb Haaland is cancelling energy leases all over this country.
So he's going to talk about canceling energy leases, and that's another proof for him of communism. So if you know anything about communist countries, so let's take China, for example. China has nuclear energy that they're expanding. They buy more oil than any other country in the world. They still invest in coal mines. They produce as much coal as possible, and they buy coal. Okay, China also has wind and solar. They have every energy source under the sun. Okay? They are the most pro-energy growth society in the world. There's no greater consumer of energy than China. It is the opposite of their policy to then turn around and cancel energy contracts. China is all in on new forms of energy. No one has a better setup for electric vehicles than the Chinese. They've invested in the infrastructure. They have battery changers all over the country. But at the same time, no one buys more oil than the Chinese. So if you're going to say, well, it's a communist strategy to cancel oil contracts, cancel energy contracts, it's not a communist strategy. It's not a communist strategy. And by the way, driving up the price of oil is good for the oil companies. And the Democrats, just like the Republicans, Democrats are capitalists. Do you think ExxonMobil cares that the price of oil goes up? If the communists were actually in charge of the American government, you wouldn't see the price of energy going up. It would be the opposite. They'd be consuming so much that the oil companies would have to drop their prices. So that's absurd what he's saying.
By a card-carrying open member of the Communist Party USA, which is completely documentable. I have it in my books.
Sure,
I can show you all of it.
Before we get into the book, I think what we're actually touching upon here is the simple fact that the Communist Party USA has relinquished its role as an independent political organ of the working class and has entirely subordinated itself as an institution to the Democratic Party. So hold on.
And you notice what Loudin is not citing. He's not citing these people's commitment to the working class. He's not citing their commitment to dialectical. He's not citing anything that would give away that they're actually communists. He's citing that some of them work with the Democrats. Obamacare was good for the healthcare companies. It's good for them. It's an expansion of the insurance business. It's not an expansion of health. It's an expansion of insurance. It mandated that people who didn't want to pay for health insurance, young people who were healthy, that they had to buy insurance or face a fine. That is good for insurance. That's not bad. That's capitalism. Or, as some people would say, including myself 20 years ago, it's cronyism. But capitalism is cronyism. It's an abuse of markets. It's an abuse of markets. So what he's citing as something that proves communists are in control doesn't prove it at all. It proves the opposite. A program that mandates that you buy a good and service is not communism. It's capitalism. It forces you to put money in the pocket of a large business.
Hold on. Let me finish. Okay,
Mao said,
what
no,
gun
let
is
me
being
finish.
used? Who makes the gun?
You have got people. The communist movement in this country controls the labor movement.
I asked you for proof. You have none.
I have a huge amount of proof.
Name one communist who controls one given labor.
You're playing a semantic game again. Look, if his point is...
Democratic Socialists of America, a communist group, took over the AFL-CIO in 1994 under John Sweeney. They kicked out all the old guard. And here's a good example. The AFL-CIO used to be opposed to illegal immigration. Used to be. When the Marxists took over under Aliseo Medina and John Sweeney, they...
So you see what he just did there? Socialists, Marxists, communists, DSA, Democrat. He's just crisscrossing all these different things that he's ever heard and putting them together as one cohesive group. They're not one group, pal. They're all different. You have people who called themselves communists that were not strict Marxists. You have people who are Democrats that have nothing to do with socialism. You have people that are Democrat socialists that have nothing to do with communism. You have Democrat socialists that have nothing to do with Marxism. There's nothing about dialectical materialism. There's nothing about the proletariat, working class people. There's nothing about class structure. There's nothing about profits in command. There's nothing about the actual structure. There's anything that was ever written by Rosa Luxemburg or Marx or Engels or Lenin or Stalin or any of these people. Nothing. He's just citing Democrats. That's what he's complaining about. That's what he's complaining about. And what he's doing is validating the meme and validating this illogical fear of communists, because if you don't understand anything about Marxism or communism or socialism, then you can have an illogical fear of it, and you can then use it to manipulate people. So the Republican will sit there and be forced to hate the Democrat under false pretense that they're socialists, then they hate the socialists. What Democrats and Republicans should actually do is hate both sides, because neither one is doing anything for you. The foreign policy of the United States doesn't align with communist foreign policy. What communist country is invading another country? That's American foreign policy. It's not communist. What communist country has an open border? That's a Western ideology. That's not a communist ideology. What communist country has for-profit health insurance companies? That's a Western ideology. That's not a communist ideology. Everything he's citing is Western capitalism. It's nothing to do with communism. In communist countries, you don't have insurance companies mandating people buy insurance so they can make money off you. You don't have open borders. And you certainly don't have imperialism. There's no imperialism. What country is North Korea invading? What country is China invading? What country is Vietnam invading? What country is Venezuela invading right now? None. What country is Belarus? Even though they're not, I don't know if they're technically communist, but they were. Who are they invading? You have NATO has expanded 10 times since 1990. But that's not an invasion. NATO went into Iraq twice. Oh, that's not an invasion. They went into Afghanistan. They bombed Libya. Those are actual invasions. Everything he's citing is something that's done by the West. It's been done by Western countries. And unfortunately, even the worst thing that's done for the West is never done for the people of the West. It's just done for a few private interests. So people aren't even benefiting from it. So everything he's complaining about is something that can be found at home in the West, has nothing to do with communism, and an irrational fear of communism, like hiding under your desk like it's 1950, when the real threat has always been internal. And it's not subversion from within, which is how so many people are defining that term, communism. It's not subversion from within. Communism is a stateless society. It's an egalitarian stateless society that is aspired to, and the stage to get there is socialism. And socialism is a concept about a society where profits are not in command, where you're ruled by the proletariat, ruled by the working class. That's totally different from what we have here, and it's totally different from what he's complaining about. But if you have this ruling class distortion of these terms, what does it do? It allows the justification for an invasion of Vietnam, an invasion of North Korea, an invasion of Venezuela. And it allows for people in America who probably would be communists to sit there and use it as a pejorative and use it as a slur against people who are standing up for their rights. So then they're automatically in defense of Democrats and Republicans. That's the game. That's why these terms and these memes and these slogans matter. That's what you got to get beyond. Thanks, everybody.